Jake Stuart with the National Sports Media Association, and today I'm joined by 2021 Nebraska Sportswriter of the Year, Luke Mullin. Luke, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So obviously your coverage mainly headlines Nebraska sports, Luke. But I want to ask you, what brought you into the industry? As a Nebraska graduate.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of interesting. I think a lot of sports journalism comes from, people who are interested in sports and, they want to kind of find a way to channel that interest and be part of the game. Me personally, I was just loved journalism, just loved always just reading and writing. Grew up reading my hometown Omaha World Herald, just cover to cover the sports page. So yeah, I got started in high school, and as soon as I got to my college, University of Nebraska, I knew I wanted to join the student newspaper. But the only thing was, I didn't know what section I wanted to join, so I applied and I said, I'll do news, I'll do sports, I'll do entertainment, I'll do anything. And the sports editor, she came to me and she said, "Hey, I want you for the sports section." And I said, "Okay, sounds good." And, here we are a few years later and I'm still doing it, still loving it. So it's kind of funny, just by chance a little bit, but yeah, just totally fell in love with it. So,
Well, Luke, this is your first award from the National Sports Media Association. What does it mean to you?
well, it's pretty crazy. I mean, to be honest, just graduated college in May, less than a year later. It's pretty awesome. I mean, I got the call and I didn't really believe it. Like I got nominated, but I was like, it's still a long shot. There's a lot of great writers in the state, obviously, but yeah, it just goes to show, I guess, that my coverage of high school sports really does go to a lot of people, and the interest is there all over, that it really does make an impact. I when I was just starting at the Lincoln Journal Star a couple of years ago, just as a part-time intern, going to events, just really kind of getting my feet wet, I definitely would not have thought a couple of years later that I'd be sports writer of the year, that I'd be at kind of the level that I am now. So yeah, it's been a crazy couple of years, but super, super blessed and thankful to have the award for sure.
And can you expand a little bit more on what you said about the high school coverage, versus a lot of the people we've had on have covered, college and mainly, pro sports teams. What is it like to cover more small market, and what does that impact for you?
Sure. I know. I think, a lot of people probably have a perception of high school sports coverage just as kind of, you got to get a story in the newspaper, not the most like groundbreaking stuff, just like, okay, what happened in the games these days, what kids are really impressing for their schools. And where I come at it, I think part of the reason why a lot of people identify with it is do a lot of digital stuff. I mean, I'm shooting video at all these events, putting highlights online and on our website. I'm recording our interviews with all the different coaches and players that I do. We started up a podcast as well to cover our Nebraska high school sports. We try to do a lot of kind of innovative stuff in terms of like preseason or end of season awards too. So for me, it's just really cool because you see these kids in these schools, all these coaches, and they tell me they really appreciate the coverage, obviously, but it just kind of gives a little bit extra pedigree, or I guess kind of credibility to the sports and all these players. So they really kind of, I think, appreciate that kind of angle of making sure it's digital focus. It's kind of that same cool coverage that you do get to see in college and sports.
And you mentioned, Luke, kind of having a different path into the sports world. Choosing between sports and news, and kind of being thrown onto the scene. But who were some of the sportscasters that you looked up to getting into the industry?
Well, it's really funny. The guy that I beat out for this award, Tom Chattel from the Omaha World Herald, a fantastic columnist. And really, I grew up reading his stuff just cover to cover. I think he's one of the best of all time. I think he's won this award in Nebraska like 6 or 7 times, plenty of years before I was born even. So he's definitely kind of been an inspiration to lead my own writing. And then another Omaha World Herald writer as well, Steve Pivovar, unfortunately passed away a few years ago, but was just, I think, the best at kind of capturing the spirit of Omaha, the city where I grew up. So he was a fantastic writer, definitely for sure. So always kind of identified with those local guys. And in terms of high school sports coverage, it was Stu Pospisil at the World Herald. So, I'm just like a 20-year-old. I'm at this basketball game, and he was just the nicest guy possible. Just, introduced himself, said, "Hey, welcome to kind of the high school sports coverage industry." And, now me and Stu, we're pretty much doing the same stuff. We work together on a lot of things. So just really cool, I think, for me to eventually meet a lot of those writers that I just grew up reading and really kind of appreciated their work. So
That's awesome. And full circle, it really shows just how willing people are to help in this industry. So that's great. I want to ask you, Luke, what, if any, do you have a single story or maybe a single event you covered that stands out to you over your time so far?
definitely, yeah. Um, there's been a lot of different high school events that have been fantastic. A lot of, kids whose stories I've been able to tell. I think one in particular at the high school level, just a few weeks ago or a few months ago, I believe, a high school basketball team here in Nebraska, the Hampton, their coach was unfortunately killed in a car accident. And I got to go out to their senior night, see some of the emotion and really get to see the community come together to honor him. So definitely in terms of emotion and impact, that was one of the most memorable nights that I'll never forget. Um, Also just in terms of, I think the biggest stories, the stories that I really felt I needed to tell, was my kind of senior capstone project here at University of Nebraska. Wrote a very long story about youth sports and racial inequality in my hometown of Omaha. A lot of youth sports are divided along racial lines.
And Luke, if you had to pick a favorite event that you covered, so maybe something you wrote about it, something special to you, what would you pick?
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of special players who it was fantastic just to talk to them, and be able to share their stories about their athletic journeys. So all of those, just in their own way, have been great. I think some of the emotional, kind of hard hitting ones are the ones that I'll really remember and take with me for a long time. For example, there was a team here in Hampton, Nebraska. Their boys basketball coach, unfortunately, he got killed in a car accident. And I came out there for their senior night, and just, the emotion in the gym, the whole community just rallying around him to remember his spirit and, all the people's athletic journeys that he touched. That's a memory I'll have with me for a long time. And on a larger scale, a story that I really had a ton of experience and something that I really wanted to highlight was for my senior capstone class at the University of Nebraska. I wrote a very long piece about just kind of racial inequality as it relates to youth athletics in my hometown of Omaha. It was something that I'd really kind of been mulling over for a while, but just getting the chance to talk with some of these youth coaches and program administrators, and tell their stories about how these big topics of course, economics and social inequality kind of trickled down to youth athletics. It was just a crazy experience for me, being able to highlight that important topic, and definitely a highlight of the last few years for me.
Wow, it seems really personal, and especially to the community. You can already tell the impact that those two stories had. The last question I wanted to ask you, Luke, and thank you so much for your time today and coming on, is what advice do you have for younger sports writers, people just coming into the industry, and maybe somebody looking to get into small market sports?
Yeah, I guess just my number one thing is just research. I mean, really, when I was starting out, my first beat here at the Lincoln Journal Star was high school volleyball. And I mean, my sister played volleyball. Like, I knew a little bit about it, but really I was, coming in cold a little bit. So had to do a ton of research just to figure out, like some of the basic rules of the game to really learn about the best players. And it really comes down to the amount of, I think, time and work you can put into it, especially with high school sports. I mean, people are always willing to talk. They're always willing to share their stories. So you just have to be able to put the work in and reach out and, do all the digging and all the, I guess, accumulation of stats and, anything you can find online, scroll through social media is a huge way, I think, to find any level of stories. But I think for any young person, I guess, trying to find their own beat or find a new job, you just got to be proactive, reach out. The worst people can say is no. They're not going to think you're crazy for trying to put your name out there or trying to get a story or a job anyway to advance your own career. So that was definitely something that I had to learn too. You just have to have that confidence in yourself to know, like I said, worst thing they can say is no, and you'll learn from every rejection, every mistake, everything like that. So
I think that's great advice. It's something we can all use, to our own works. Luke, thank you so much for coming here, our 2021 Nebraska Sportswriter of the Year. Hopefully we'll see you this summer in Winston too.
absolutely. Thanks, Jake.